what is a super easy way to have good pronunciation right from the beginning of learning English? I'm going to tell you how you can do this and how I know it works. A lot of videos will tell you that you need to use imitation and repeat the words, and that is very good and definitely do that. However, what's worked for me is not just that, but listening and listening really well. Not listening to just words or phrases, but listening to each letter in the word, and sometimes how the letters change, noticing the pattern, asking questions. So, how do I know this works? Well, I know a lot of random words in random English or random languages because I teach students from everywhere: Russia, China, Korea, just everywhere. And so sometimes I like to learn a little bit of their language to say hello or whatever. But I've noticed that when I do this, a very common response is, wow, your pronunciation is pretty good. And I get this a lot. And I started thinking, why is that? Because I actually lived in South Korea for 2 years as an English teacher. And they have a habit there when you walk into the store, well, smaller stores typically, you say hello, the store owner says hello to you, and you go about shopping. So something that happened a lot is I would walk into a store, 안녕하세요, right? And they'd say, wow, your Korean is so great. I barely knew any Korean, right? But the first impression was they assumed I was so good because apparently my pronunciation was amazing. And that's what a lot of people can think from the very beginning. Even if you know very little English, if you really focus on how people say something and ask questions to native speakers, you're going to do super well. Another example was some Russian that I learned randomly for some Russian students. And I was saying some random sentences. And one of my students said, actually, when we pronounce that, we more say it as this. I was like, oh, really? Okay, interesting, right? Это моя подруга, stuff like that. And dobro pожаловать. It's super hard to say, but you can practice a lot, right? Listen for each little letter. This is super important. Listen, listen, listen. You will hear me say that speaking is super important, and it is. But to speak right, you first have to listen, 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 and to ask questions. So if you are trying to say something or you hear me pronouncing something in any of my videos, ask me, hey, why are you saying it like that? I thought it was like this. One example of that, going back to Korea, is in my textbook. I had learned that this one sound was supposed to be li, li. But when I went to church and I heard them singing using that exact word, they never said li. It was always a. So really listen to how native speakers are actually pronouncing things. Because if I hadn't focused, the first time I heard it, I thought, what? Is that true? And I listened again and again. Yeah, it is. They say it different. So really, really listen and then speak. Okay. But don't just listen and don't just speak. You need the two of them together. Okay. If you want more tips like this, just like and subscribe and follow me for daily advice and help in English. I'm Megan Mendoza, and thank you for watching English with Megan Mendoza.